Come with me on a journey back through history. The year is 1942. There's a gentleman named Winston Churchill, who was the Prime Minister of Britain at the height of World War II. And there's a legend that goes, he would stick a hat pin through the center of his cigars, and when he was in negotiations, the people across the table would be too distracted by the ash, it would never drop into the ashtray. And so he would perplex his opponents, and he'd get a favorable deal out of it. I'm going to try to replicate that today. So originally I started by trying some 1/16 rod by sticking it up the ass end of the cigar, but it was just too thick. I was cracking too many wrappers. So what I've settled on is a 1 mil stainless steel rod. And what I'm going to try to do today is stick this rod up through the core of the cigar and see how long I can get this ash to stick on. Full disclosure, I have tried this with a couple different cigars. I think that looks pretty good. So let's try that. There we go. And I'll show you as I smoke this the issues I'm having, because as the ash smokes, it contracts. There we go. The ash contracts, and what you end up with is a rod sticking out the end of the cigar that you got to keep popping back farther in. So I'll give you guys an update as we go. So let's light it up and see what we're dealing with here. There we go. All right, so we're about a half hour into this delicious stick, and you can see what I'm talking about. We got our rod that's sticking out about 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. And in order to hide it, you got to keep pushing it deeper and deeper into the cigar. And eventually, if your rod isn't the exact right length, it starts kicking out the head of the cigar. So we're good so far, but I anticipate that that's going to pop out the end of the cigar before long. So there's your update. We'll be back in a bit. All right, so we're about an hour into this stick, and you can see that our rod right there is sticking out a little bit more. You can also see that there's been kind of a break. See if I can get that a little better on camera. There's kind of a break right there where that's separated, and I think if I push this rod anymore, yep, there's the issue. So it didn't go quite straight through the cigar, so now it's popping out the side. So there you go. See, it's this kind of stuff that makes it entirely feasible that this is something that happened, but probably not practical. I mean, if you were to, start a rod and then stop the cigar halfway through, it still would have been pretty incredible, but who knows? So I found that you have to use a cigar that is very well constructed to achieve this. This is the Plasencia Edifal. You can see our wire just barely sticking out the end there because the cigar's constricted about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch over the life of the cigar. But it's working extremely well. I mean, look at that. No obvious cracks. If you didn't know that that rod was in the center, you wouldn't know that there was a rod in the center. So far so good. And here we go. So this is our first official stick. We've done a couple experiments before now, but none of them really turned out great. You have to use a very well constructed cigar to achieve these results. And even then it constricts quite a bit. So this rod on the end is slowly moving out the end of the cigar. So you're having to constantly push it just a little deeper so you can't see it anymore. And so once I'm done with the stick, I'm gonna trim it to length. So I know exactly what length of rod I need for this particular length of cigar. And this is the Plasencia Edifal. You can see the ash on that is pretty damn impressive. All right, here's our final check-in for this particular cigar. As you can see, I've had to push that rod in quite a bit, and it's starting to poke through the head of the cigar. So if I want to make this rod specific to this size, I need to trim it down by probably 1/4 inch, maybe a little more. But you want the rod as close to the head by the end of the cigar as possible, Otherwise, you're not going to have the structure there to hold it all the way to the end, and then all your ash is going to fall off. Such a cool cigar. If you guys can get your hands on any of the Edifals, I highly recommend it. Alright, so I've tried this with a number of different cigars, and while it works pretty damn well, I am having some struggles getting the rod to be the correct length. Because some cigars contract different amounts, and so when you have a rod that works for one cigar, it doesn't necessarily work for other cigars. And so, while I think there's something to this legend, it's definitely plausible. It causes a whole bunch of trial and error, and unless you're smoking the same cigar consecutively and have that rod figured out exactly, it's going to be, number one, difficult to keep that rod even with the end of the cigar, so it's not poking out and giving a tail. And number two, it's difficult to get the correct length so that you have the rod sticking back into the head far enough to where it's not falling off, and you have a nice sturdy ash. In fact, you can kind of see where it's separating right there. So it's definitely possible. This has been a fun experiment. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you for the next one. Bye.